Hello and welcome back to the Back to the Future guitar build. In the last episode we stuck all the inlays onto the outside of the fretboard. This time round it's going to be starting to mark out and dig the holes for those to go into. So we'll dig the holes, we'll shape the fretboard, and then finally we'll stick them in. This of course is where it starts to become a challenge. Very sharp knife. What I'm going to do is just marking along the edges now, like that, and I'll go all the way around, trying desperately not to go over the ends, because any deep scores I make where I don't want them, it's going to leave a mark. So going all the way around the edge here, a couple of times for each one. Then it's across the end here, not across where there's only tape, just across where there's actually some of this, and then down the inside as well. Now what I'm doing is not going all the way to the bottom end, because that's where it can slip out. So flip it over, do the other side. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I should be able to take this tape out of the middle now, if I've done it right. Might go from the other end as well. So this way, just to take those end bits out. That's interesting. So this paper caused the knife to skid a little bit. So I'm going to have to watch out for that. Get that bit of paper out. Right, and what I'm going to do is go around that another couple of times just to make sure that it's scored properly. And now that's done, I can set about taking this first one off. I'm just using a blunt Stanley knife blade, not too blunt, but not so sharp that it'll chop into things. And I should be able to get that underneath and just lift up these markers. It should, there we go, it's going under. It should just tear away that paper. Very gentle, so I don't want to break these. There's one. And there's the second one coming now. There we go. Those two out, and I should now be able to just remove that paper. It'll leave a bit of a mess where the super glue is, but that's okay, so I'm going to cut that away. And there we are. I can shift this with a bit of judicial application of the Stanley knife blade. And there it is, slightly cleaned up. I'll probably use a little bit less super glue next time. So I've got the scored marking, so all that trouble I've been to now, and I've ended up with a nice marking here of where I'm going to dig out the wood. So what I can do is go around that again, so the corners where I was really careful, I can now just join those up to make sure the lines go all the way. Being extremely careful to stay within the lines here. Like I said, any marks are going to show up on the final thing. So on there. Okay, that's all the corners joined. Okay, So now for this bit, I've got a newly sharpened chisel. This one's not really big enough. I've stuck the thing down to the bench as well to make things easier. And what I'm doing is just really carefully cutting down to that line, taking the bit out, just to kind of accentuate where that line is. I'll need to get a smaller chisel for the rest. So I can do these long sides first, and I'll just carry on round and do that to all of these bits. And now that I've got those sort of chamfers in all the way around, I can start to work away and take a little bit out of the middle as well, being extremely careful. I don't want to slip and then take a big chunk. Very, very painstaking. I can start to compare that to these. I can see that's going to fit in there. Now, getting a consistent depth of these is going to be fairly critical so that I get a nice flat sit. So what I've got is this attachment for a Dremel, and what it does, it screws onto the top. You put a router bit in it, and then you can see through the little hole, and that goes flat, and you can cut to a certain depth. That's a lot of fiddling about to set that depth exactly right, because there isn't a screw thread. It's just you just move it up and down. So you have to dig holes in another piece of wood until the cows come home, and eventually you get the right kind of depth. So let's try that. So it's going to the right sort of depth. What I'm finding is that it's really hard to see because it's dark mostly inside here. It's hard to see where the thing is. So what I've done is just hollow out the very middle to give me a sort of a flat bottom there. I'm going to take my chisels and I'm just going to take it down a little bit further. So again, I can go around the outside with this, with the sharp knife. So it cuts in. Across the end there, and I can kind of see that the depth I'm heading for, so I can take a little bit more off around the edges here and just really carefully start to bring that down to the same level. Well, that's taken an absolute age, but that's just about in. It's not easy at all trying to get the bottom flat and try and get the corners to fit, but that is now in. You see, I can't even get it out. There we go. There's a fairly deep hole that fits in, and there's just the smallest of gaps. Okay, just another 17 to go. So as you can see, it's getting on now. I've managed to do all these down here, got the single one at the 12th fret, and now if I zoom in a bit, now what's happening is these edge parts are getting really thin. So you see you've got the fret cut, and then you've got to cut out this thing, and you've got this really thin little bit in between. Well, I've just found that splits out really easily because the grains are cross. The tiniest bit of extra pressure and that just pops out. So what I've done is glue it back together with some super glue. I have to be really, really careful now. So rather than using a chisel to chop down here, which is what I have been doing, I'm just going to have to use the very sharp knife and just bring it down really, really slowly on both of these edges. In fact, all these remaining ones, these remaining three as well, it's going to be the same. In fact, it gets worse and worse. Down here you've got a tiny, tiny little bit, so it's going to be a bit of a fiddle. And the other thing that I'm finding, as I get closer up the fretboard, the Dremel won't fit anymore. It touches these. It's obviously it's going to affect the depth. And beforehand it's been fine, it hasn't touched. So now what I'm going to have to do is to mark out all of these, store them somewhere, and then cut them out. So I'll cut the holes and then bring these in. So that's going to be just a little bit more difficult. I have to be careful not to get these mixed up. Okay, well, it's been about 15 years, but I finally managed to get this done. I mean, look at me, I was only 20 when I started. I don't want to see any comments on that either. Okay, so that's done. What I've done is I've now written numbers on all of these so I know where they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So I'm going to have to take these out again because I'm going to have to start shaping this fretboard, and what I don't want to do is use any blades on it while this is in because I'll break them. So I'll take these out, stick them on a piece of sticky tape, and then I'll put them somewhere safe for a bit. So I've got a piece of masking tape here. I've just turned the ends over so it sticks to the desk. And I'm just going to pop these all out in order, if I can get them out now. And I'm just going to stick them on the right way up. Now I've written the numbers so that I can get them the right way up as I go down as well. So I can put them back in exactly the same places. So some of them are tighter than others. I'll just lever them out a little bit with the tiny chisel. I've actually had to buy a new chisel, the tiny little one, to do this as well. Okay, and I'll carry on, take the rest of them out. So now the next thing to think about is what order I'm going to do the rest of this in. I want to put the frets in, I want to cut it down to the right size, I want to shape it. Now getting the right order is quite important, and also this one's going to have a nasty bit of binding all around the outside. It's going to be even more difficult. So I think what I'm going to do is to shape it first to get the camber on it, because what happens when you do that is that you cut off some of these, you shape away some of these edges here, and the saw cuts disappear and you have to re-put the saw cuts. So it'd be nice to have a straight edge that I can then use to cut against to recut these in. So it feels like I'll put the shape in first, then I'll do the saw cuts again, and then I will put the mother of pearl back in, glue it in, then I will sand that down to match the shaping of the board. Then I can sort of polish the board up with some finer sandpaper, and then finally I can cut it to shape, and then I can put the frets in. The frets go in last, so that I can nip them off as I come to them. So I think that's the order that I'm going to do it in. And of course the other thing to think about with the order is when I put the binding on. Now there are two ways of doing it. You can either put the binding on, cut it down, which is easy, and then put the frets so the frets just sit on the top of the binding. The other way is much more difficult. You put the frets on and then you put the binding on and you cut the binding over the frets so you get a little nib at the end. That's much more difficult and time consuming to do, and unfortunately that's the way it was done on these guitars of this sort of era. So I think I might have to do it that way. I might regret having made that decision. So starting to shape the fretboard. It's still stuck to the bench, so I can use that. What I've got is one of these gauges. So what the radius is on this is 12. I think it's radius, either radius or diameter. 12 inches. And that's what's stated on the plan, and that's what you can find on the internet. So I can just take this and I can look, and there's quite a bit got to go off these sides. So I'm going to do, take a plane. Actually I've only got one, well I've got this big one and a small one, so you probably choose a better one. This is probably a bit big, but what I'm going to do is set it up so that I'm not taking a great deal off. So what I don't want to do is chop huge amounts. So I'm just winding the blade back until it's barely taking any, and then I can just wind it very slightly forwards. Okay, that's just it. Now, just start to take a tiny amount off. Like that, and just keep checking it with the gauge until I start to approach where it needs to be. and really I probably won't be getting anywhere near the actual implants. Just taking off the edges, because what I'm going to have to do is sand it mostly to get it right. But I'll just keep doing that until I start to get some shape into it. So now I've got a shape starting to appear. I don't want to take it too far with the plane. I've got a sanding block, so this is a 12 sanding block, so it's got the curve in it. And I've got some double-sided sticky tape on it and some 80 grit. Could probably do with it being a bit fiercer than this, but it's all I've got. And that just sticks on. I'll put the tape in the middle so I get the curve in it. And what I can then do is I'll pop a mask on and I can just start to sand that down. Now, I'm finding that the fretboard is slightly wider now than my sanding block, so I might have to plane a little bit off the sides. So now that I've trimmed it down a little bit, my sanding block is now the same size or slightly bigger than the fretboard. So what I can do now is start to bring that down. And what I've done, the central mark, because undoubtedly I'm going to sand a lot of that away if I'm not careful. So I've made a mark on either end for the center so that I can replace that central mark, and then I can mark out my taper. Now that's important because these are relative to that central mark. So again, just a matter of spending a little bit of time now just sanding away. And then every so often I get my 12 gauge and then just come down here and just check it. Okay, and we're starting to get there. There's a little way to go yet. And also what I'm doing as I go along, I'm rescuing the dust because I'm going to use that later. And as you can see, we're pretty much there on that radius now. You can see that what's happened is we've worn away the lines from the frets, so we'll have to cut those back in, but we've got the basic lines. I don't want to go so far that I can't see the lines anymore, but they're getting there. So that's far enough now. So the next thing I need to do is to put the inlays in and glue those in, and once they're dry I can then sand the whole thing again and get it down to the right radius. Now I've hoovered it to get rid of all the dust. I'm going to take all these that I stuck on this piece of tape, and I'm going to put them back in the holes to make sure they all still fit and there's no bits got in to make it not fit. So starting with number 17, there's 17 not 18 because I made one out for double, which is going to go at this end. So now that I've put all these back in, bit of an issue in that they're kind of sticking up. I think I must have taken more than I thought off the centre because they're sticking up, and the problem is because of the curvature. When I look down here, I think what's going to happen is there's not really enough left on the meaty bit when it comes down the curve, and I'm concerned that when I sand these flat I'll go right the way through. I don't want that to happen. So what we're going to have to do is go through each one and re-dig the holes. So I wonder if I could have done it any better. If I needed it to be flat so that I could mark it out, maybe I should have then sanded it and then put them in. But basically I'm going to have to go through each one again with my chisel and dig the hole a little bit deeper. And I'm a little bit annoyed because I tried it with the first one and I've made a bit of a mess, made a bit of a hole right at the end of there, right where it'll show. But hopefully I can hide that in the next phase. We'll see. So another 15 years and I'll have all these set back in a little bit. I've done these two. I've got to do all these 100 million more. So after ages, we're finally in a place where these are all nicely let into the fretboard. It's more difficult once it's rounded because obviously these are flat, fretboard's round, so they're going to stick up a little bit in the corners, especially this one that goes all the way across on 12. But I've let them in sufficiently that I'm fairly sure when I glue them in that the bits that are sticking out I can sand off, and I won't go all the way through, because that would be a disaster. I'll lose the corners and it'll look a right mess. So next thing to do is to stick them in place. Now the glue I'm going to use is some epoxy. Now this is epoxy which takes 60 minutes to set, so it's going to give me a decent amount of working time. The 5-minute stuff I don't think would be give me any time at all. And what I've got is some of the dust that I've collected. Now obviously I spilled a chunk of it. That should be enough. So what I want to do is mix the epoxy, add a bunch of the dust, and what I'll get is a glue that's a very similar colour to the fretboard. So when I stick these in, it'll ooze out into the gaps and fill them. So when I then sand it off, hopefully I won't be able to see any gaps at all, and it'll look like they're absolutely perfectly cut, which to be fair they aren't. So here we are, a decent amount of the glue. I'm adding in some of this powder. It does take quite a bit of the powder to give that colour. But I've got an hour, so I can spend a decent amount of time making sure it's thoroughly mixed. There we are, lovely brown glue. Now pop these out, I'm trying to keep them the right way around. It's going to be messy. This is actually an old lollipop stick that I'm using. If I squodge some glue in there, I don't need too much, but just enough so that it'll stick in and it'll squeeze out. So I'm going to get to the edges as much as I can, and then we'll push these back in and see what we get. Oops. Now what I'm hoping is as I push it in, the glue is going to squeeze out. It did on the first one, but not on this second one. So I'm going to put a bit more in because this one has got a slightly dodgy bit that I want it to fill. Let's try again with that. Okay, now I'm doing a good pressing because I don't want the glue to raise up to sit underneath and cause the thing to be actually higher than I need it to be. So there we are. It's a bit messy, but there we are. Let's carry on and do the rest. Obviously I'm going to ruin me Stanley knife blade here. Such is life. Take the next two out. I should perhaps have taken them all out in one go. Put a bunch of glue in up to the edges. Right, that's all of them in now. I'm just going to go over them, and it looks a bit of a mess, but hopefully it'll clean up. I'm just going to go over with a bit of extra. So anywhere there's a bit of a, that I know that there's a bit of a gap where I made a bit of a mistake, I can wodge in a little bit of extra, and maybe round the edges here, just to make sure when I clean it up there won't be any gaps. But of course I don't want to put too much on at the same time, because what I'll find is it's a hell of a job to clean it up. And vinyl, just a quick check over to make sure that nothing is really sticking up, because that's what'll cause a problem if I end up filing it off. Okay, leave that to dry, give it a good couple of hours, and then we'll come back and try and clean it up. So there we are. Now that took a lot longer than I thought. I was a very much younger person when I started doing that, but eventually we managed to dig the holes for the inlays. We've stuck them in and they're all ready to be cleaned up. So I think that's worth waiting till next time, because it's been quite a long episode already. So as ever, give us a like if you liked it. Feel free to press subscribe, and maybe I'll see you next time.